Thank you, everyone, for your patience due to the rescheduling of this show a few times. And I hope you don't mind my hat tonight. I am absolutely freezing. And we're developing more information. And at the time of this airing, we have a few more updates to bring you about the Father deLaire defamation lawsuit against church militant Michael Voris and Anita Carey. Anita Carey unfortunately found out just how church militant stands behind its reporters and writers. Well, church militant doesn't, nor has church militant provided any legal aid to Anita Carey. This should frighten any reporter or writer that has provided content to church militant. We will go through this in more detail, along with the recent sale of the church militant property and the details of the deLaire defamation lawsuit and where it stands. So let's bring in Kristine Christlieb to talk about this.
Hey.
Hi, Kristine.
Oh, it's so good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. So are you cold in Detroit?
Actually, it's not that cold. That's my philosophy. It's not that cold.
Well, I tell my brain that, but my body says something different.
Right. No.
All right. So let's start, Kristine, with the sale of the property. And I want to bring up this document, this tweet from Ron Conte on X. And he said, news about St. Michael's Media, often called church militant, the property at 2840 Hilton Road sold for $312,000. And then the property, which you and I worked in the studio at 2900 Hilton Road, sold for $377,000. The first one was $312,000. The second one, $377,000. And this was sold on January 9th. Now, Kristine, I'm not a real estate, commercial real estate realtor, but this sounds awfully low to me for sale prices, especially with houses that are going for just as much. What's your take on this?
Precisely. I mean, I would say exactly that. I know the homes in that neighborhood. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. Ferndale is a little bit odd. There are some tear downs, where they're putting new construction on very small lots. So you have some of that. And then right next to it, you'll have like a 1-bath, 2-bedroom bungalow, that's almost 100 years old right next to it. So it's, if I were a real estate person, it would be extremely hard to value property in that area. But and mixed in with that is commercial property. So for example, on Hilton Road, where you had both of church militant's properties, right next door are, our private residences. And Hilton Road is I wouldn't say it's a major thoroughfare, but it's an important street. So I would have thought that 2 commercial buildings, on Hilton Road would have been, would have brought more than, new construction housing in the same area. And it's not.
And what we don't know either is if any of these buildings had been mortgaged. So when church militant St. Michael Media received the sale proceeds of this property, were there any mortgages that needed to be paid off? And also, this ties into the deLaire lawsuit, doesn't it, Kristine?
Well, it does. And let me just say a word about, we don't know if it was mortgaged. I know that back in November, when that would have been November of 2022, when Michael first talked about, that the organization was in financial trouble, he did mention that for the first time they were having to borrow money. So I'm wondering if they didn't maybe they just got a line of credit. I don't know, but it's possible that they took a line of credit and, that it was secured with that property. We don't know. What was the second half of what you said, Kristine?
About the sale of the property?
Yeah.
That it ties into the deLaire lawsuit, because in the hearing that both
Yes.
you and I sat in on, that was kind of a turning point about how much Church Militant could commit to actually stating in a summary judgment how much they would be able to pay. Correct? Did I understand that correctly?
No, that's exactly right. So, the plaintiffs were trying to get, they're trying to settle this without a trial. And
Mhm.
so the plaintiffs' lawyers are trying to figure out, okay, well, exactly how much could, uh, could Church Militant offer, in settlement? And so Church Militant was saying that it could only offer $200,000. And so the plaintiffs were saying, well, stop, stop, stop. Hold on just a minute. Let's wait. Let's wait and see exactly what the proceeds are from the sale of, the property that's coming up. But they also said at the same time that they weren't trying to put Church Militant out of business. So, uh, and another thing I would mention is, one of the things that we were told is that at least the studio building at 2900 Hilton Road, that building was bought by someone very, very favorable to the ministry. It's possible somebody got a sweetheart deal on that. We just don't know.
And of course, Church Militant was going to rent that building in order to
That
stay in it from the favorable buyer.
potentially, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Now, the next thing I want to draw our attention to, let me do a screen share on this. And that is, I want to go back to the 2022 Form 990. And this is Schedule L. Okay. Schedule L is asking about loans and to and or from interested persons. Now, why this is important to look at is because Mark Ballesteri was one of the people that was originally named in the lawsuit by Father deLaire. And it was also discovered in the discovery that Voris loaned $67,225 totally to Mark. And was it approved by the board? It said no. Was there a written agreement? It says yes. But curiously, it says, is it in default? And the answer is no. But this loan was supposed to have been paid off by the end of 2022. And then it also shows that Michael Voris was loaned $841 for personal expenses in 2022 as well. Kristine, do
Mhm.
you want to expand on that any?
Well, it's very interesting information. And, when we were discussing the 990 in one of our previous sessions, I wish we'd talked about that then, but, it's fine for us to talk about it now. Um, So first of all, I would mention, the Balistreri, it says he's not in default. It's possible. So from what we can gather, he was supposed to pay it off by the end of 2022. They filed this particular 990 in November of 2023. It's entirely possible that he didn't pay it off at the end of 2022, but he did pay it off before November 2023, and so they're just counting it as paid off. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So we don't know that it hasn't been paid off. It's and it says it has. Is that correct?
No, it says no. It says
Okay.
it says in default, yes or no, and the answer is no.
It is not in default.
Correct.
So he's paid it.
Yeah, that's what they're stating.
Yeah.
And of course, it says the board did not approve this, just like the board did not approve everything that went on at Church Militant.
Oh, I mean, this is just so unbelievable. I mean, it's just unbelievable that something like this could go on. I wanted to mention, a lot of people may wonder, well, why do we keep talking about this? Well, because one of the things you're seeing in real time the consequences, the direct consequences of this sort of bad management. So, they were without board approval, they're handing out loans, in the 5-figure range. I've never heard of such a thing. It's remarkable.
And can you comment on what Mark Ballesteri's role is in the deLaire defamation lawsuit?
Well, it's the whole question of who actually authored the original story about Father deLaire. So that's where all the discussion is. Was it Balistreri? Was it Michael? Was it a combination of the two of them? It's just not known.
But Anita Carey penned the stories, correct?
No, she wrote some follow-up stories. Okay.
Oh, okay.
But the original stories were it just said Church Militant. Okay. It didn't have a name, but a lot of people felt like that the kind of information that was in the story, only Balistreri would have known that. I mean, he's
Yes.
the canon lawyer, right? He's the one who is familiar with all the gossip about canon law and canon lawyers. So he's the one who, and of course the concern is that when he talked about sources, and I haven't, they've taken those stories down as far as I can tell. Just a few minutes before we went on, I went on Church Militant's site, Googled Father Georges deLaire, and absolutely nothing comes up. So it seems like they've totally scrubbed those stories.
And folks, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Because that's what he asked originally. That's all he asked originally, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it, which kind of leads us, if it's okay with you, Kristine,
yes,
to the conversation we were having off camera about Anita Carey. So one of the things that people need to realize is that when I was reporting for Church Militant, as well as Kristine, when we were reporting for Church Militant, once we wrote something, it didn't belong to us. Any content we produced belonged to Church Militant or St. Michael's Media. So Anita Carey she might have been perfectly willing to take down the story immediately that she wrote when it was pointed out that there were problems with it. But she did not have that authority. Excuse me. She didn't have that authority to do so. So I would assume that that fact is going to come into play if this thing eventually goes to trial.
So, Kristine, let's talk about the latest development on the deLaire defamation lawsuit.
Yeah.
And of course, that is the judge gave church militant Michael Voris and Anita Carey a deadline to secure counsel because none of them had attorneys. And I'll let you take it away from there.
So St. Michael's Media. Okay, so who's being sued? So Ballasturi is in default. Okay, I don't know exactly how that plays out. Okay, but the remaining people are St. Michael's Media, Michael Voris, and Anita Carey. So one of the reasons that counsel dropped off for St. Michael's Media is they were claiming we cannot adequately represent both St. Michael's Media and Michael Voris and potentially Anita Carey. We've got to, we got to separate those defendants out. And so, so St. Michael's Media, they did secure counsel. So they have legal representation, but both Michael Voris and Anita Carey are pro se. They are representing themselves. So, I think the old saying is the lawyer who represents himself as a fool for a client. So Michael's not even a lawyer, but it's very, very dangerous. Not dangerous. That's probably
well,
too
it is
strong.
dangerous.
Well, I mean, it's definitely ill-advised to represent yourself in this sort of a situation. But it's just back to, it's not surprising to me that Michael would take this on, because one of the things I remember vividly is how much I don't think I ever saw him happier than when he was talking to his lawyers on the phone. He had that great big voice and he was talking to his lawyer and he was just having a big old time. He loved the banter, the back and forth, the legal thinking of talking with his lawyer, the strategizing. So I'm sure he believes that he can do as good a job as most any lawyer can. Or it's possible he's just forced financially, to represent himself. But the fact that St. Michael's Media has, kicked him to the curb, is not going to pay for his legal counsel, or Anita's. They kicked her to the curb too. They've just and let's be clear about who that is. When we say St. Michael's Media has kicked them to the curb, what we mean is the board. The board of St. Michael's Media came to a decision that they would not provide legal representation for Michael Voris or Anita Carey.
The one decision they finally make. And folks, we're not showing you those documents for a reason. And here is why. It has Michael Voris's address and Anita Carey's address and phone numbers and emails on there. Yes, it's public information, but Kristine and I talked about this before we came on, and we don't feel it's right to publicly air that. If you want to go look for it, you can do that yourself.
Yeah.
But we can tell you that Michael Voris is not in Detroit, right, Kristine?
That's right. He's living in Houston. And so I used to travel when I was doing fundraising in Texas. It was one of my very first major gift fundraising jobs. I traveled to Houston all the time because that's the college I was working for. Most of our donors were in Houston. So I knew Houston very well. And so Michael is living near River Oaks, which if those of you in the audience who know anything about Houston know that River Oaks is the most exclusive area of Houston. So Michael's living somewhere near River Oaks. It's River Oaks, Rice University, all that area is very exclusive. So that's where, and I'm wondering, Kristine, so in a few days, on February 4th, the retreat at sea departs from Galveston. And so most of people who are on that retreat at sea are flying into Houston, and it's just it's an hour drive over to Galveston or something along. I think it's about an hour. So I'm wondering if he is just temporarily living in Houston. Maybe he's going to maybe he's going to land on that retreat at sea as sort of a surprise for some of the guests, or maybe he's just going to meet with some of the folks, before the retreat or after the retreat. But so for now, his address is in Houston.
Well, nothing would surprise me at this point. But I will say this, it looks like the trial is moving forward, and that's going to be in March. Kristine and I are both going to try to see if there's a way we can attend it virtually, and then bring you updates on that as well. But we just felt it was important. It's, all of this that's going on with Church Militant is just sad. It was frankly all avoidable. And we don't want to dox, even though it's public information, it's not going to come from my channel. That's what I'm going to say. I just feel like, let's have some integrity here. We don't have to disclose every sordid detail. And we want to keep people safe. And Michael deserves to be kept safe. And so does Anita Carey. Kristine, I feel sorry for Anita. I mean, I absolutely feel sorry for her because of the situation that Church Militant St. Michael Media has just totally turned their back on her.
Yeah. As we've talked about, Kristine, it could have happened to either one of us. You were very involved in writing stories for evening news.
Yeah.
And I was very involved in writing, news packages and so on. I mean, our names are out there, are attached to stories in scripts. So it could easily have happened to one of us.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, because I did talk to you about it because it concerned me so much. I was asked to write a news story for evening news. There was nothing that could be substantiated about this priest. Nothing. And I was asked to write this story, and I just flat out refused to do it. And then I won't say who took it over and wrote it himself. And there wasn't a shred of evidence in that story. And I adamantly told them I do not want my name on this.
Well, that was a very, very smart thing to do. I don't think I ever came up. I never came across. I never had that situation come up. But that's exactly the right thing to do. And there were people there who were kind of willing to. Well, I would not. I would say that was. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to know exactly what happened with Anita. exactly how that all came down.
Yes.
Because, the other thing to keep in mind is, especially some of us, we're absolutely newbies. I mean, we were brand new to news reporting. We were, so you're much more likely to sort of do as you're told, certainly at the beginning. But, I'm glad you had the presence of mind to say, nope, not doing it.
Yeah, that was a very interesting,
Hey.
yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, there was no way I was gonna put my name on that one. Um, which just goes to show you how loosey-goosey a lot of this was ran at Church Militant. And, now Anita is caught in the crossfires of all of this, and
Mhm.
which is unfortunate, for her. So, folks, I hope you understand why we're not giving out Voris's address, even though it's public now on the documents. I just didn't feel like it should come from my channel. And so there you have it. Now, what other updates do we have on the deLaire defamation case, Kristine?
Well, I would say it's very, very likely that this case will settle and will not go to trial. And I say that because I think it's, abundantly clear. Well, I shouldn't say. It seems to me, just from what I've read, that Father Georges deLaire is in a much, much stronger position than St. Michael's Media is. And remember, one kind of back to the loan, that we're talking, the Balistreri loan. St. Michael's Media has a real credibility problem with the court right now. They failed to turn over documents in discovery. Then it turns out there's this threatening message from Michael Voris to Balistreri about, that if he, is involved in a deposition, Michael says he'll ruin him. So there's,
And Kristine, let me stop you there.
yeah,
And I want you to talk a little bit about um, that came out in the second deposition, correct? And then what Kristine Niles' role was in all of this.
yeah. So what happened was there's a period of time of discovery, what's called discovery. And so each side, makes up a list of things that they want to see. I want to see every email between this date and this date. I want to see every correspondence with Mr. Balistreri. I want to see, so there's a list of documents and evidence and, things that the defendants have to produce. Well, and there's a deadline on it that you have to produce it within a certain amount of time. Well, Church Militant failed to submit some of the required documents in the time frame, and the plaintiff's lawyers, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly how they figured this out, but they realized that there were missing documents. Well, then when those missing documents were presented, oh my goodness, that's where they found these messages where Michael was threatening Balistreri. If you are in a deposition on this case, we will ruin you. I don't think it was that specific. But so, there would be some questions about exactly what he meant and so on. But the point was, it looked really like he was threatening. So you have these threats. You have the fact that they, had to be coerced into producing the documents. Then you have the fact that there's, these numbers about the amount of the loan are kind of all over the map. It just seems like these are not serious people, and they just are having trouble kind of getting to the facts. they're having trouble with the facts.
Yes, because originally, in the lawsuit deposition, I think they said that Michael said he had loaned Ballesteri 52,000, but the 990 shows that it was substantially more, 67,000.
Correct.
So there was, I can't imagine how that could have gotten, how Michael could have forgotten that, since it appears he's the one that loaned the money through St. Michael Media.
And of course, they're claiming that there's written documentation of it. So I mean, St. Michael's Media's credibility with the court is very, very weak. A very weak credibility. So they're going into this with not in not very good shape. Then, of course, there's all the facts, that all the accusations they made. Once you get into that, then you're into a whole nother realm. So all I'm saying is they're not in a strong position. It's likely they will not win. And so that's why I'm saying they will probably do everything possible to settle.
Yeah. And that appears to be the smart way to go.
And they begin jury selection. I want to say March 5th, I believe is the date.
It is March 5th.
Yeah. So between now and March 5th, so probably in the next, 30 days or so, watch for a settlement.
Okay. Are you ready to take some questions?
Oh, yes. Sure.
Okay. So Catholic Cristero says, please, I want an update on what is going on with Simon Rafe. Do you know anything, Kristine?
I don't. I'm pretty sure he's still employed.
Yep, I'm pretty sure he is too. Sorry, we can't give you any more than that. Then we've got a JM. One of my faithful viewers says, Michael moved from Ferndale to Warren in 2021. So I thought, did he sell his house in Warren?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually thought about driving by. I was kind of up that way the other day, and I thought about driving by just to see if he was still in the house. And it would be easy to know if he was or not, because he had two flagpoles in front. One that had, the Catholic flag with the keys to the kingdom, he had that one. And then I believe his other flag was an American flag. I can't actually remember, but I've thought about, you know what? I'll drive by.
Kristine will report on this the next time she comes on.
Yeah, I'll drive by.
All right, let's see. What other questions do we have? Let's see. Rosemary says, how could Michael afford that? I'm guessing somebody
has given him, their condo for a period of time or something. Somebody else is paying for it.
Yeah, I that's a strong possibility, because there were donors down in Texas that were that Michael often visited. So I would think that would be true too. And then Deb says, what about Christine Niles' part in the investigation? How is she involved?
Oh, yeah. Well, she was in charge of, responding to all these discovery questions. And she was the one who missed, who left out some. And I actually do believe Kristine. I bet, because what happened is there were some email exchanges with Ballesteri, and he used, like a pseudonym. So
oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So she collected all the emails, related to Ballesteri. She forgot that he used this anonymous that he used this pseudonym. And so she forgot to hand over emails from the pseudonym. I'm sure it was I'm guessing it was an honest mistake, but it really, it totally infuriated Michael.
Yes.
He was furious that she had made that error.
I heard the same thing, and I can't say anything more about that, folks, but let's just say the fury that some of us got at Church Militant from Michael Voris wasn't, I mean, he didn't discriminate. Who would get it? If you made him mad, you got it. You got that verbal abuse pretty bad. As Hunter Bradford came on the show and told everybody. And folks, this is the thing that so many people don't get. Part of this whole story of Church Militant isn't just about Michael Voris breaking a morality clause, going back to his old ways. A lot of this is about a boss who mistreated his employees.
And it wasn't just Michael.
Yes, and it wasn't just Michael. Absolutely, Kristine, you're right. And how no one would prevent and protect the employees. So if you think that bosses yelling at you and degrading you, and if you think sending out half-naked pictures to donors and staffers and whoever, if you don't get that that's sexual harassment, and if you don't get that that's abuse, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Can't help you at all.
Yeah.
Kristine and I both worked in corporate America. We know how bad this stuff can get. And it was bad at Church Militant, and there was no protection for the employees. You care to comment on that before I go off on my rant?
Well, I mean, I would just say, that I've found it, as I've, said before, they made certain people on the, they made people cry, thank goodness, I was never in that position, but they did make people, they made people cry. And, I had interactions with, Simon Rafe that, I would not continue to meet with him just one-on-one. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, think about that, folks. Uncomfortable to meet with Simon Rafe one-on-one. Yeah.
And he wasn't sexually harassing me. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that kind of abuse. It was, he was,
you didn't feel safe that what you told him wouldn't have some kind of retaliation back on you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had no belief that if I told him something about Michael, that he would hold it in confidence. I had no expectation of that at all.
Yeah. And folks, in corporate America, whenever you had an issue with a boss, at least this has been my experience, that you went and you talked to HR, not to get the boss in trouble, but to get some backing that if you went further about issuing a complaint or filing a complaint, you had some protection. And they always had you and another person and your boss in a room with you. There was never this one-on-one, because it then becomes he says, she said.
Well, and then the other thing, my belief is it should never be 2-on-1. You shouldn't ever go into a meeting with the HR person and another superior alone. Then it's 2 against 1.
Yes, that's a good
So,
point,
you
Kristine.
know, I think you would always want a witness or your lawyer or somebody else with you in that sort of situation. And once you're employed by a place where you're starting to think about those sort of things and you're having to consider that, you need to leave.
That's
You know,
exactly right.
you
You need
need
to
to
leave.
leave, which is why I was looking for a job when I got laid off.
Yeah, well, you know how long I lasted, 6 months.
Yeah,
Here's another good question from Deb. Will
sure.
Anita and Michael still be tried by themselves? Will they be charged separately? Okay, this isn't a criminal trial, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I honestly don't, I would assume it's all gonna happen together, um, just because they're all in, you know, it's all on the same document, it's all on the same docket, you know, so I'm assuming it's happening all at once. But I must say, and I'm not a lawyer. I used to do, you know, when I worked for Church Militant, I did almost all the legal reporting. So I mean, I have some familiarity with, you know, legal processes and so on. But you know, I honestly can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay, here's one about what is Brad Eli's credibility?
Oh, um, you know, when before I started working for Church Militant, I really admired, you know, Brad's theological knowledge, and I still think he's pretty good on that stuff, and I also think he's a pretty good thinker politically as well. Um, but as far as like as a manager, you know, and of course that was part of his role. Yeah, I don't think he was really that I don't think that was his strength.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's see. Do we have any more questions? Anna Marie says, this is Sister Anna Marie,
Okay.
says verbal abuse never resolves problems or issues. Verbal abuse always leads to disaster and damages relationships and trust. That's exactly right, sister. It sure
Mhm.
does. And not only that, but working there, and I had been a follower, church militant, Kristine, for years
I know
before.
you have.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
reason why I came was because I had met William Mahoney at the Father Rothschild or Father Rothschild, Father Rothrock's a peaceful protest when the bishop suspended him because he spoke out truthfully about what the Black Lives Matter organization stands for.
Yeah.
So that's where I met William, and he, you know, did an interview with me and started corresponding with me about me working at Church Militant. So,
Mhm.
and folks, I should have told you this in the beginning. I'm extremely tired. So my lisp is getting worse and worse as the night progresses, and I'm stumbling over words, and I apologize, but I've just been extremely tired. Um, so Kristine, any news about that? Let's see. Deb says, how are the employees being treated now? I can only hope better since all of this has come out. Well, we pray that they're treating them like they need to be treated with respect.
Well, you know, it's so funny today. I'm sure you've seen this on the internet, Christine, but you know, the young woman who was laid off and she videotaped her conversation with HR when she was being laid off. So you've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I was watching a YouTube video with an HR executive who was sort of doing commentary alongside that video, and talking about how just, oh my gosh, he couldn't believe how this layoff was being handled. So I was thinking, oh, he would be stunned if he knew how the layoffs were handled at Church Militant.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was horrible.
Can you
It was
wanna
horrible.
do you want to, share how that all came about?
Well, there were 2 rounds, of course. When I was laid off at the end of March, it was a mass layoff. So we went to evening prayer, and then Michael says, could some of you stay behind, and the rest of you, you need to leave immediately. And the ones who stay behind, it's Kristine and blah, blah, blah. And he, names off a bunch of us. Okay. So we're all going. So I found the infamous memo on the copier, so I kind of knew something was coming. But so he shuffles us all into the pit, and does a mass layoff. Okay. And according to that human resources guy, you never really want to do it that way. It's almost as bad as getting an email, telling you you've been laid off. So, we all get laid off, and immediately it's like, pack up your stuff and, you're done. So, that's what our layoff was like.
Well,
And
tell them
so,
about the poll.
pardon me,
Tell them about the poll.
the
On a
what?
scale of 1 to 10, Kristine,
Oh,
what's
yeah.
your
Oh,
likely
well,
chance?
yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons I got laid off is because, well, there are probably multiple reasons I got laid off, but like a week. So Hunter Bradford announced that he was no longer going to be on the evening news and that he was leaving in June. Okay. A week later, or it was right about in that time frame. Stephen Wynn called me up into the office and said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to Church Militant, into the future? And so I said, well, how committed is Church Militant to me? I mean, that was my first response. Well, Stephen did not like that at all. And he said, you need to give a number. You need to give a number. And he was like, it was sort of menacing, And so I said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, my commitment is, I would say, a 3, because as I said, I was already looking for a job, So
And
that's
why, Kristine? Why were you looking for a job?
because I could see evening news was going nowhere, and without evening news, I couldn't figure out what was going on. It was clear evening news had been abandoned. Okay. They didn't tell us that. Okay. They didn't say anything. They just never talked to us about evening news. And the numbers were just, tanking.
Horrible.
Yeah. The numbers were horrible. I couldn't figure out what was going on. It didn't seem like there was any future there. I'm somebody who wants to have a vision for what you're trying to do, and they were just not sharing any information with it. So I was like done with it. I'm like, I want to be somewhere where something's happening, where where it's clear I'm part of something, I'm valued, and so on. So I was already looking for a job. But then the second round of layoffs that happened on December 1st were an even greater disaster.
Of
I mean,
2023, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, that was even. Now I was not there. Okay. So I was there a few, like an hour and a half later, and talked with some of the folks, but I didn't actually I wasn't physically present, but there may be more on that to come.
Yes. Folks, we have more that we're working on. Kristine Christlieb is developing several different aspects of this whole story, including the day this all came down.
Yeah. But it's gonna take some time to
Yeah.
make all that to get all that set up. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so stay tuned. It's not over. We're still reporting on this because it needs to be reported on. I can't tell you all how many donors have reached out to me thanking me for filling them in about the real story behind Church Militant. And like Kristine and I have said from the very beginning, this could have all been eliminated, unnecessary, had Church Militant just been transparent about what happened, about what Michael did, about his morality clause break that he made. If they had just been transparent to the donors, but instead they did what the bishops do, and that is they try to cover up the priest
Mhm.
abuse and then send him away to rehab and then reassign him to another parish. And that's exactly what Church Militant criticized bishops for. And that's the exact same thing they did to Michael Voris.
Well, and they also covered up their just bad management decisions, you know.
Yep.
The evening news didn't make it. It just didn't make it. And that's not like I've said, that's not a terrible thing. You know, it's extremely expensive to put on an hour-long evening news program 5 days a week. It's very expensive. And Michael was just a little too ambitious. And instead of, you know, just sharing that and backing off and regrouping, and I think part of what happened is he just didn't know what to do next.
I think that's probably true, Kristine. And we know, you know, without revealing a lot, that he was struggling with his issues for a long time.
Yeah.
And everybody just turned a blind eye to it. Well, I won't say everybody. Management and the board turned a blind eye to it because they were interested in keeping Church Militant going for their paychecks. Just going to say it, folks. That's what it was. Has the board changed, Kristine?
Well, I guess they've added this new executive director, but it's not sure. I'm not clear about if he's a member of the board or not. I don't know. They're calling him an executive director. Typically, an executive director would be an ex officio member of the board. In other words, a non-voting member of the board. They don't know. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know either. So they have made YG Nightstorm an executive director. I don't know what that means. Don't know. I don't remember that we ever had an executive director before. Kristine, did we?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Well, not that I know of. Certainly not while I was there.
Yeah. So, folks, we're developing more, so stay tuned. And I do apologize for moving this live stream a couple of times. We thought we had some information coming forward, but it still hasn't come forward yet. And we at least wanted to give you this much of an update about Church Militant. And we just, you know, we have to keep them in our prayers, Michael in our prayers. Anita Carey, please pray for that woman.
Mm-hmm.
She is just totally being thrown under the bus. No protection at all. Now she has to represent herself because she can't afford counsel. So a lot of it we all have to be praying for these people. And I want to tell you one other thing before we leave, and let me get to it. And if you are not following Ronald Conti on on X, I want to show you this one last tweet before we leave. And that is this. Church militants' legal expenses for 3 years, 2020, none. 2021, 253,374. 2022, 263,428. So the miscellaneous revenue legal settlements were an additional $5,000 for 2022. Guys, that is $500,000 in legal expenses in 2 years.
And I believe there were legal expenses. That was for St. Michael's Media or for Church Militant?
That was under St. Michael's Church Militant legal expenses.
Okay, well, I believe there are legal expenses under St. Michael's Media as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is a lot of legal expenses for a small well, I'm not going to call it apostolate. For a small nonprofit like this, that's a lot of legal expenses.
Yeah.
And Michelle asks, are there new interviews coming up? We are working on them. Mm-hmm. We can't say who yet because haven't gotten the official confirmation. And there's another one that I'm working on that if I can get this person on, it'll blow you away. So how about that? And I this isn't clickbait or sensationalism. I'm not trying to do that to you all at all. I'll let you know whether I'm able to or not. And if I'm not, I'll just tell you. Okay. Kristine, do you have anything else before we close?
No, thank you so much, Kristine, for inviting me back. And, I just want to remind everybody, be very, very careful and be wise and be good stewards of the money that you give to charity.
Yes, good point. Thank you, Kristine. All right, hold on, Kristine. I'll be with you in a second.
You bet.
Thank you. All right, everyone. I just really appreciate you being on and for watching. More is to come. And remember, eternal life is forever. Got a plan? Be sure and pray for everyone involved. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.